You're finally here.
Hey there, today we will be covering Zankou guide. In this guide we will go over her character role, her full kit breakdown or overview, all her awakenings, all her team comps, her rotations, her gear and her bond gifts. What we'll not go over in this guide is Sister's love for Daffodil. The middle one, you will know what that one is. If you know, you know. Otherwise, unlucky. The last one, talking to Ghost. Apparently, she is not real, but in my head, she definitely is. So, what is Zankou's role in the teams? Her main role is to be a dot applier and a follow-up attacker, and she's mostly used as a sub DPS quick swap character. She doesn't actually main DPS despite it stating here. The only time you main DPS her really is at A6. Otherwise she is a sub DPS and a dot applier, mainly used for her dot uptimes. That is it for her roles in her team comps. Let's get into Zankou's kit. First off, we have to start with she has two states, reality state and illusion state. And you can swap between them by pressing her skill. You can see by the outline around her that she is in illusion state, and by the buff down here that she is in illusion state. And when it runs out, she'll return back to reality state, or if you swap her out, she'll also return to reality state. And you can see down here she has a permanent buff that increases her damage stun in reality state. And in illusion state, she'll get a buff that increases the crit damage of dots specifically. So whenever dots crit, which has a 50% crit chance, they will deal more damage as they get a bonus to their crit damage. So first up, we have our 5 normal attacks. Not too much to write home about. It's just 5 attacks and they don't do a whole lot. Then we have our hold attack. Pretty basic as well. But you can see our skill light up whenever we do the 4th or 5th basic attack or hold attack. This skill applies 5 heart wrench on the enemy, which is a damage debuff or dot that deals damage over time and lasts for 30 seconds. And we also deal massive break damage, so it's important we use this skill light up. So let's go into illusion state with the light up skill. Keep in mind, before we enter illusion state, it has a limited time that I will show you. So we do our heavy attack and then we do our skill. And you can see that all have 5 stacks. If I keep auto attacking, they will get 10 stacks. So you can stack it up to 10 times just by auto attacking. And they will all take dot damage over time. Now illusion state has a limited time. If we go back into illusion state, you can see in the bottom right here that this tick is going on. And when we get to the end, we get a second skill that you can use. This skill also does a massive amount of damage, but the most important part is it enables our second ultimate. This ultimate not only does multiple instances of damage plus 1 big burst of damage, it also applies 5 different stacks that also takes the enemy's HP down. And even if you swap out of Zankou, if you have used her enhanced skill in illusion state, that we are gonna get here after the timer is up, or before it's up. After you have used the skill, even if you swap Zankou out and back in, she will still retain her M2 ult. If we go ahead and use her ult here, this is her second ult that we get in the illusion state. You can see the targets now have 2 debuffs on them and they're taking damage twice. There's 5 stacks and 10 stacks. Then you also have her normal ult, which becomes available for free shortly after she uses her second ult. So let me stack up my ult energy again here. Now that our ult energy is full, this is a normal default ult that you can use if you haven't used her skill. But I want to show you that you can use this ult for free shortly after her second ult. So let's go into illusion state, press the skill to enter it, then wait for the second skill. Press the second skill before it runs out. Now we get the M2 Alt. Press M2 Alt and keep attention to the bottom right. And now we get the Alt for free. That it's a limited time, so you have to use it quick. And it does a massive amount of damage. As you can see here, 2 instances of good damage. And that is her entire kit breakdown for her skill, ult and basic attack. I'm sorry it's kind of long, but I hope that explains everything. Then for the support skill, we have her normal support skill where she just does a bit of damage whenever she enters from a cycle. Her first passive is the Scorch enhancement that makes it so you can have up to 3 Scorch stacks at all times. And whenever you inflict another dot, whether it's a Zankou dot, a Scorch dot, or a Lacrimosa dot, or some other kind of dot, it will refresh the Scorch dot. So you basically have infinite time on the Scorch dot itself and it'll never run out. That's basically how her passive works, which is really powerful. Her second passive gives her 100 cycle energy whenever she starts combat. So you get 1 insta cycle for free at the start of combat. It has a 30-second cooldown, but it can only be used once per combat. And this passive also increases her cycle intensity by 100, so she gets a flat 100 cycle intensity. That is it for her passives. Let's get into her life skills. First up, we have the volleyball life skill, which is just increase all volleyball star characters served by 10. So this is a stat boost to volleyball. Then increase the Tycoon incentive fund earnings. This increases how much you earn weekly from the weekly volleyball event. You can earn 500k every week, and it is a 1 million limit every 2 weeks. So this one is kind of weird. It just means that if you don't complete or if you lose the weekly volleyball, you'll still earn more funds for the Tycoon, but you can just do heist instead. This is kind of useless. Increase the volleyball's star character spike by 10. This is also pretty nice. And then again the Tycoon incentive fund, and then increase the characters received by 10. The stat boosts are pretty nice for volleyball, but they're not really needed. You can clear the entire volleyball without these stats. Her second passive is cost 1 additional city stamina per fight club match. So if you really like doing fight club for your city stamina, you can speed up how fast you spend your city stamina with Zankou, but it's not really recommended in my opinion. Her life skills aren't really something to write home about. Then we also have Zankou's other passive for the open world up here, which is turn invisible for 20 seconds and increases movement speed by 50%. You can enter this by pressing G. If you do it at a store like this, you can go in and you can steal your favorite doll and you can just walk out without getting noticed. That is one of the perks of Zankou, along with that she does run faster in stealth. This also does work in heist, so you can run around in heist without getting spotted by the flies, and you can pick up items. It's a really nice passive for heist itself. I'll probably put a clip up on screen for that. Let's go over Zankou's awakening. The first awakening basically does so you can have Hunt and Delusion on at the same time, so both her illusion and her reality mode passive buffs, and it also increases how much it actually buffs. The second up basically gives you kindling that increases your ult damage. Third one just gives you resistance to interruption and restore HP per second from the passive buffs. Fourth one allows you to quick swap her for her M2 without having to wait in illusion state, and getting her M2 ult as well at the start of combat. This is really nice. Her A5 basically makes you able to insta break a target on your first skill and increases all allies break damage by 300% when Zankou is on the team. The sixth one basically increases her last hit on her ult damage by up to 240% for each dot stack the target has on it. I recommend going A5 first and then A4. Next up, I recommend taking A1. Then I would recommend either A2 or A6. And last but not least, I would go A3 as the last option. For her resonance effect, she increases her level by 1 at Awakening 3 and increases the damage ratio of her ults by 20%. Awakening 6 increases Zankou's attack by 40% for 20 seconds anytime she deals damage, and it refreshes every time she deals damage. It also grants an enhanced effect for 60 seconds, which basically lets you transfer scorch stacks from one target to another target whenever they die. This is nice for AoE flaws, but besides that, it doesn't really do a whole lot. So that is everything for Zankou's Awakening stats. Let's go over Zankou's build, skill priority, and her options. I'll pull up a graphic. You can see we have Zankou here and her skill priority. I will say it's ult / skill and then basic attack last. Her ult is a big part of her damage outside of her scorch or her dot buffs. Then her ult definitely does the biggest amount of damage, and her skill after that does a decent chunk of damage. Her basic attack isn't used that much, but it is still worth to level up, especially if you are going for a more main DPS kind of vibe. In Break Team it has a bit more use than in other teams, or if you're playing her as a main DPS, but for the most part ult and skill are the two things you'd want to level up. For her weapons, we have her signature weapon as her best weapon, which goes without saying. And then for her second best weapon, we have chest weapon. And you might wonder, why is chest weapon good on her? It has Cosmo damage. We don't really care about the Cosmo damage. The only thing we care about is the attack and the crit damage bonus, since crit damage applies to the Scorch effect, and Scorch and dots are the majority of her DPS. This crit damage buff helps that do more DPS, so it's a really good alternative for her signature weapon. I personally don't think her signature weapon is worth pulling, but we will get into that in the pull recommendations. For her main stats, we have two main stats here. We'll go over the gear after. This is for the Break Team specifically. You'll want Break main stat, and then you will want Break sub stat, and then you'll want crit rate and crit damage as your other sub stats, and then damage percentage. But make sure you prioritize Break if you want to run the Break Team, so you'll want all the Break. If you're not running the Break Team and you're running a Lacrimosa team or a main DPS team with Zankou, then you'll want elemental damage and then crit damage. You can also run crit rate instead of crit damage. That is fine as well, depending how high your crit rate is. Crit rate usually helps with your ult deal more damage, and crit damage helps your dots deal more damage. If you are close to perfect gear, you'll want crit rate over crit damage if you don't have elemental damage. But at lower gear investment, crit damage will be better than crit rate, where she's used more as a scorch spot than a main DPS. For the substats, you'll want double crit, damage percentage, and then attack percentage as follows. For her gear sets now, this is what I would recommend for most people, which is the Crimson Twin set, which increases your incantation damage by 10% and increases your attack by 6%, stacking up to, I forgot how many times, but it stacks up. That is the main damage that you'll want to be running on her. There are two other options that I want to mention if you want to go for them, but I recommend the Crimson Twin. I have seen tests with people running the Anima set for the crit damage bonus if you are using her as a scorch spot in Lacrimosa team, and your Lacrimosa is pretty built and you're just using Zankou for the scorch. You can go the Anima set for the extra crit damage bonus for your dots to do more damage. There's also the Cosmo set or Lost Radiance. which increases your damage or your defense threat to the target after ulting, which is also supposed to work for break damage. So in the break team you could run this potentially and then use your ult before you break the target, and then when you break the target you'll deal even more break damage. I tested both of them on test server, and in my test they were not as optimal as the Crimson Twin set, but I did not have optimal stats on test server, so take that with a slight grain of salt. But in my testing, Crimson Twin was the best set, and that is why I'm recommending that set specifically for Zankou in all scenarios. But if you want to test yourself for the Lost Radiance set or the Anima set, or if your Lost Radiance or Anima set has better stats than your Crimson Twin set, then it's worth to test out and see if you can actually clear BTR or other content faster with those two console sets. I just wanted to point that out, as it is two options that are available and they are viable, but in my testing they didn't turn out to be better. But I also had really bad stats on test server. I've tested a bit on global, but Crimson Twin in my testing was still the best set. But if you see people running the two other sets, that is completely fine as well. But I applaud you to do your own testing for these two sets to get a better gauge, as depending on your stats they will change. But I will go ahead and recommend Crimson Twin set, and I don't feel bad about that. That is everything for her gear guide and how to set up Zankou. Let's get on to the next topic. Next up we have the Zankou team comps. The first team comp here is the break team, which is the one I recommend to most people. It's the free to play team comp. This actually does really well, and you'll see that in the graph on the next slide. But the break team are one of the best teams in my opinion. Not only is it pretty decent at a 0, but it's also really strong at a 1, although it falls behind once you get some signature weapons. Then we have the Scorch Adler team, which is probably the second best team that I would recommend. Not only do you need one less limited character, this team also outperforms the other teams when it comes to being a 1 and having signature weapons and at a 0. This is definitely a really strong team. And the next team we have is the Scorch Iroi team, which is the premium limited team. This team only really outweighs Adler team once you get all the signature weapons on all the characters, and once you start getting more copies it will start being better than the Adler team. But at a 0 without signatures or at a 1 without signatures, the Adler team will definitely perform better. So keep that in mind. And then last but not least we have the Discord team. This is an option, but I do not recommend this team because of how bad it is compared to the 3 other teams. But it is still viable to play and an option if you want to play Hanel in the Zankou team. So I have it on here, but there will not be a specific rotation for this team, as the rotation is pretty much the same as the Adler and the Iroi team, so you can look at those rotations. But since I don't recommend this team, I did not provide a rotation for it. That's everything for the team comp sections. Let's get into the actual damage between these team comps. I also made a graph to show the team damage from my testing. The first 4 teams we have here is with no signature and no copies at a 0. The worst team we have here is the Raid one, which is the Discord team. That is Hanel at 1 minute and 37 clear time. The second worst one is the Iroi team, and the second best one is the break team, and the best one is the Adler team. So you can see here the break team is definitely completely fine without anything. Next up we have will signature T1 and a 0. So the worst team here was once again the Discord team. The second worst team was the break team, and the second best team was the Adler team, and the best team was the Iroi team. So why the big change here? Well, for the Iroi team, how that became the best team is because Iroi gets a huge buff from his signature weapon that he can buff the entire team, which actually provides the biggest benefit out of all of these 4 teams when we talk signature weapons. Lacrimosa and Zankou weapon is in almost all of these teams, so nothing much changes between them getting the signature weapon. In Adler team, you only get Lacrimosa and Zankou, so the damage isn't that big. In this, you get Lacrimosa, Zankou, and Iroi, so they get the biggest boost from the signature weapons, but Iroi definitely contribute the most in this team from signature weapons. In the Discord team, it does increase a lot in time, but still not enough to outweigh the other ones. The break team doesn't really benefit anything from the signature weapons as they don't get any more break. Now let's get into the teams with A1 but no signature weapons. If you notice, all of these times is faster than the signature weapons, so getting A1 is way more worth it than getting a signature weapon. At the last point, we have the Discord team as well. They are really bad and they really don't benefit from signatures a whole lot. Then the second best team, we have Adler and Iroi team is actually tied, which is quite surprising considering Iroi does get a big boost from her bonus 15% damage that she gets from her first copy, but it's not quite as much damage, it seems, as her signature, so she only ends up going equal with the Adler team. And the best team is actually the break team at A1. Not only do you get 1 free break, which massively increases your damage, you also get daffodil copies, which makes you able to break the targets faster. So throughout all of this, you can see that the break team is a very solid team, both at A1 and without A1 and signatures. It is performing in the top 2 teams. The only time the break team isn't good is when you have signature weapons, specifically on Iroi. But otherwise, this is how the teams are set up and their damage, and I hope this comparison helps you out a little bit to decide what you want to pull for when it comes to the team comps. So let's start off with Zankou's rotation. How you're gonna play her is you're gonna heavy attack, then you're gonna skill, then you're gonna basic attack until you get skill 2, and then you're gonna use skill 2, then you're gonna ult 2, and then you're gonna use your normal ult. That is your standard rotation for getting everything off whenever you have full energy. For the quick swap, you are gonna heavy attack, and then you're gonna press skill, and then you're gonna swap off of her. This works around every 5 seconds, so keep that in mind. If you do have her A4, you are going to press skill 2 and ult 2 and ult whenever they are up, as they will be when you have full energy, and you can skip the first part of the heavy attack combo. That is everything for the Zankou rotation. Let's get into how the actual team rotations work. Let's get into Zankou's first team rotation, the break team. I have the characters built on screen. Keep in mind, all of them are running break damage, even Zankou. Once you have break damage, you can go into crit rate, crit damage, and other substats for damage. So let's get into the team rotation. We're gonna start on Zankou, swap into Daffodil, use QE on Daffodil. Then we're gonna swap into Sekiri, use QE on Sekiri. Then we're gonna swap into Adler, use QE on Adler. Then we're gonna swap into Zankou, hold attack, press skill, then auto attack until we get our next skill, then press skill, press alt, and then you're gonna press alt again right after the first alt. You're just gonna spam it. Then you're gonna do a few auto attacks, swap into Daffodil, do a few auto attacks on Daffodil, like 4, swap into Zankou, hold attack E, do a few attacks on Daffodil, press E and then swap into Zankou, hold attack and swap, and you keep this up until you get your ults back. Once you get your ults back, you can press E on Adler and Sekiri, then swap into Daffodil and press Daffodil ult. Once you have Daffodil up, you're gonna rotate all the ults again. So you're gonna rotate Sekiri ult and then Adler ult, and then you're gonna go back to rotating Zankou ult. And you just do the entire rotation again from the top, as we did at the start. And that is the entire rotation. Now we go back to Zankou ult. That is everything for this rotation. I also have the rotation in graphic form that I will put on screen if you prefer to seeing it that way. We have the next team comp, which is gonna be the Scorch Adler team comp with Lacrimosa. Keep in mind the stats are on screen for the characters, which has changed a bit compared to the last team. Let's get into the rotation. So we're gonna start on Zankou again, swap into Lacrimosa, Lacrimosa G, then we're gonna QE on Sekiri, QE on Adler again, then we're gonna swap into Lacrimosa and we're gonna QE on Lacrimosa in our ranged form. Then we're gonna use the full combo of Zankou, which is hold attack, E and then auto attack until we get our next skill. And then we're gonna double ult here. So ult and then spam the next ult. Then we're gonna swap into Lacrimosa, 4 attacks dodge, 4 attacks dodge if you can. If not, you're gonna do skill and then 5th attack, swap into Zankou, hold and E, 4 attacks on Lacrimosa, then use her skill and then swap into Sekiri for her E and ult, then swap into Adler for the same. If you don't have Adler ult, that's fine. Go back to Lacrimosa, get Lacrimosa ult with 4 attacks, swap into Zankou, will skill 5th attack, and then we're gonna do Zankou, hold E, then do Lacrimosa 4 attacks, hold skill, swap into Zankou, and now we're gonna do Zankou's full rotation for her ult. And that is the entire rotation for this team. You just repeat it over and over from here. Also have it in graphic form if you prefer seeing it that way over in game. Then we have the last team rotation, which is the Iroi, Zankou, Lacrimosa, Sekiri team rotation. Keep in mind we do have DPS stats on Zankou and Lacrimosa. Let's get into the team rotation. First we're gonna start on Zankou, swap into Lacrimosa, press Lacrimosa G, then press QE on Sekiri, and then EQ on Iroi. Then you're gonna hold attack, press it and then swap into Lacrimosa, Lacrimosa ult, and Lacrimosa E. And then you're gonna swap into Zankou, hold attack, E, and then you're gonna auto attack until you get her E again. And you're gonna press her E once it's up, then you're gonna press her ult, then you're gonna spam ult to use her second ult. Then we're gonna swap into Lacrimosa and do 4 attacks on her to get our E skill. Then E skill, 5th attack, swap into Zankou, hold attack skill, then into Lacrimosa again. Then we're gonna E on Lacrimosa, swap into Sekiri for Sekiri QE. Then we're gonna Iroi EQ. Then we're gonna hold attack, press, and then into Lacrimosa ult. Then we're gonna into Zankou. We're gonna Zankou hold attack E. Then we're gonna auto attack on Zankou until we get our second skill and our cycle energy. Then we're gonna cycle into Iroi, then back into Zankou and use both of her ults. And then you're just gonna repeat that rotation over and over again. I'll put a graphic on screen with the entire rotation if you prefer to see it in that form instead of in game. For Zankou's bond gifts, we have the Cool, which is 100 points for 600 fonts, which comes out to 0.16 points per font, which is gonna be the cheapest option available. The second cheapest option is gonna be Serenade at 200 points, costing 3000 fonts at a 0.06 points per font. this is actually a pretty high value one compared to most characters. So I definitely recommend buying the 200 points one if you want to spare or spend a little bit of extra funds. Then at the 400 points value one, we have the T set, which costs 15k funds at a 0.02 points per funds, which is pretty normal for most characters, but definitely not the best use of your funds. So that is the gift breakdown. If you wanted to know what the best gifts for Zankou is, I definitely recommend the Serenade or the Coolie Cool, depending on how fast you want to finish her, but the Serenade is a pretty good value. Then we have Zankou pros and cons. The pros is that she has a really fast rotation, hold, click, E, swap off, really fast, but also her main rotation is pretty fast, even if you do her entire rotation. Next up, she does not need her signature. She can do most of her damage without her signature, and it's only really needed for main DPSing her. Low resource cost. She might not be as low resource cost as Iroi, but for someone that's supposed to be a main DPS, she is pretty low resource cost, as you can avoid leveling her skill and her basic attack. Her ult still does a decent amount of her damage, so I would definitely suggest leveling up her ult still. But her skill and basic attack can definitely be left at level 0 if you're trying to save on resources. But if you ever want to invest more into her, you can level up her skill and then her basic attack later on. Then we have future proof, which means she can be played as a sub DPS right now, where she can have permanent Scorch uptime. And there's probably a lot of teams in the future that she could potentially work in by just giving the team a permanent Scorch buff. So even though she's not a main DPS in that sense, she does have some future potential because of how she works with Scorch. Then we have the Break team. I think this is a big pros, since it's the first real meta Break team that we have in the game. It's really nice to see that Zankou is bringing something new to the table, and Break is actually a really decent team to play now, especially for free-to-play players. So I put this on the pros, as I really do enjoy playing the Break team. And I think it's cool with a little bit of a different meta. Then we have the cons. Her rotation can be very difficult, especially in quick swap comps, and if you're trying to reach the highest ceiling of what she can do, the rotation gets really complicated. Another con is she needs kinda a 3+ to be a main DPS. She isn't really that used as a main DPS until a 3+. She's more of a sub DPS and a Scorch applier, unfortunately. 2 teams. I did show 4 teams in my guide video, but we have basically the Break team and then the Scorch team. That is her 2 main teams that she is going around. Yes, you switch Iroi and Adler around, but the team are basically the same along with the rotations. So it's technically 2 teams, so she doesn't have a whole lot of options right now. Different stats. This is also a bit of a con, that you want break stats in one team, then you want crit in another team, and it's just, if you ever want to swap her to another team, you will have to get different stats. Hopefully you might have stats from your other teams or your main characters being built, so you can put those on Zankou, but it is a little bit annoying having to have different consoles for her in different teams, and she relies on different stats than most other main DPSs would have to. So that's another con in my opinion. That's it for the pros and cons. Then we have the pool recommendations. Do I suggest pulling on Zankou? Of course I do. She is a powerhouse of a character. She can be used as a sub DPS in Lacrimosa team and really elevates the damage the Lacrimosa team does. And she also has a really high ceiling if you want to max her out. I recommend getting Zankou, and if you want to spend more, I recommend getting 1 copy of Zankou. And if you want to spend even more, I recommend getting 2 to 3 copies of Zankou before getting her limited weapon. Then I would get her limited weapon after getting a free. And then you can get the rest of her copies if you want. I recommend stopping at A5. I really don't think A6 is worth it, but if you are at A5, you might as well go to A6, right, for the extra 20% attack. But all in all, I think Zankou is a powerhouse of a character, and she really swaps up the meta. Not only does she provide a new meta break team, which is really fun to play, she also provides a fun playstyle to Lacrimosa with her quick swapping. Before we end this video off, I wanted to mention a Sweaty Whale rotation that also works for this team. Keep in mind this requires A6 characters for the most part, or at least A3 Lacrimosa with A4 Zankou. So we're gonna start off with Iroi E, swap into Zankou. Then you're gonna heavy attack skill on Zankou, swap into Sekiri, QE on Sekiri, and then you're gonna swap back into Zankou. And then you're gonna use both your ultimates on Zankou. Then you're gonna swap into Lacrimosa. Then you're gonna skill and basic attack 5. Remember, this is using the frying pan build, while all my other rotations are using the normal attack. Then you're gonna swap into Iroi, use her ult, heavy attack and basic attack, swap into Lacrimosa, use her ult, and then basic attack 5. How can you use basic attack 5 2 times? Well, here is the thing. If you use skill and basic attack 5 and then swap out in time to use ult on another character, it will pause the time, and the basic attack 5 will go off during that time, but the skill window to use the actual basic attack 5 doesn't go away. So therefore, after you swap into Lacrimosa and Q and stall out the timer a bit more, you can basic attack 5 again, because the cooldown to use basic attack 5 from the skill is still open, because you time stalled with 2 ults. Therefore, you can get 2 basic attack 5s from Lacrimosa in 1 skill. So next up, we are gonna use Zankou ult, heavy attack and skill. This is just her normal ult into Lacrimosa, basic attack 1 to 5 into Zankou heavy attack skill. Then we're gonna Lacrimosa skill, basic attack 5. Then we're gonna swap into Sekiri, because she has full Esper cycle, into Iroi to get hexed buff. And then we're gonna use Iroi E. Then we're gonna swap into Zankou to use heavy attacks and skill. Then we're gonna swap back into Lacrimosa to use 5 basic attacks. Swap back into Zankou for heavy attack skill. Swap into Sekiri, which her ult and E should now be up. And then swap into Zankou for her last 2 ults. And that should be the entire rotation. I don't have a video myself recorded of this rotation, but I will link a Bilibili video down below in the comments and in the description of this entire rotation, where he cleared the hardest boss in the game, which is currently the new Crucible, in 23 seconds. Remember, this is a whale sweaty rotation, so I don't expect a lot of people to be able to do this rotation, but I wanted to include it for the people that actually want to try it, as I want to provide as much information as I can in my guide and cover everything that other creators might not be covering. So that is gonna be the last thing for this guide. Hope you enjoy and hope to see you next time.